Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Path and Bounds Creative Office Hour. My name is Stella Guan. I'm the founder and CEO. And today we have a guest from New York City. Her name is Amy Lima. She is an emerging UI UX designer, and her work is really amazing. It caught my eyes, and she also has amazing personal branding and content creation tips to share with us today. So, hi, Amy. Welcome.
Hi, Stella. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So I actually found you on a online community on Facebook, which is really random. I looked at your post and I checked out your portfolio, and I was immediately blown away because it definitely stood out in early stage talents. Because one, you're super confident in your abilities. You have an amazing about page. Also, you have great visual design chops, which makes you stand out amongst a lot of early stage talents. And that's why I want to speak to you. So, I learned that you study economics and the entertainment business in college from your LinkedIn profile. So, you also intern at some of the biggest players in entertainment, like Sony Music Entertainment. So, I just want to ask you, what makes you want to pivot your career to design?
Yeah, that's first of all, thank you so much for such a lovely introduction. But that's a really great question. I definitely come from a diverse background. Even before my college days, I was actually pretty interested in arts and science. I started my own independent newspaper with friends. I used to perform live poetry. I studied astrophysics, so I've always kind of been
Wow,
multi-talented. Yeah, it's all
that's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. So I always had varied interests, right? And kind of considered myself multidisciplinary in that way. But I guess one common theme that weaved all these disciplines together was just a deep appreciation and fascination for the human experience. So in the music industry, I felt the most authentic and kind of expansive in my role when I was connecting people with each other and the experiences that they loved. So whether that was producing a live event or marketing an upcoming record, I realized that my high emotional intelligence was an asset in those spaces, so I could kind of easily communicate wants and needs across fans and artists and teams very naturally. So when I realized that I could leverage these passions and strengths into design and technology, which I've always loved, I kind of hit the ground running and haven't looked back. So I kind of see my progression into the world of design not so much as a pivot or transition, but more so kind of the most natural evolution of what I've always been doing.
That's amazing. I love how you said it. It's a natural progression, not a transition. And
Mhm.
I can tell that we have a lot in common already because I myself am a multidisciplinary creative. I
Mhm.
also briefly worked in another industry, broadcast journalism, and I love a lot of
Mhm.
different things. I design a lot of different things, and I think if, a lot of people are actually inherently creative. They just didn't know about it before,
Mhm.
and our path is not
Right.
linear, so it's kind of like a meandering path,
Mhm.
and it makes sense, to do the things that feel right at this moment in your life. And I'm so glad that you took up design. So you speaking about
Yeah.
your, what caught my eyes initially is your portfolio. I think it's really beautifully done. It's especially excellent in storytelling and the visual design, which is something a lot of early stage designers lack because it's something that isn't, usually taught in school. It's more of a soft skills, so to speak. Do you have any tips or tricks for people, who are just starting their career for becoming good or better at presenting design projects in engaging ways? What do you do to make sure that your projects are engaging to read?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, thanks so much for those kind words. Honestly, the best advice is something that I realized pretty early on in my design journey. That's kind of been a guiding principle of mine is that there are no shortcuts. Kind of from the earliest days of, me starting out in design, I spent a lot of time just studying the most successful portfolios of I could find, and from those featured in publications to like these senior designers I admired, and these high places, I'd bookmark them and dive really deep into their design decisions that they made in their case studies, why they presented things a certain way, the layout, visuals, hierarchy, storytelling, microcopy, like what buttons they were using or not. Some of them use links, like so I just started training my design eye very early on, kind of like you would for anything else. And once the time came to create my own, I already had some best practices in mind that I knew to follow, right? But another tip I have is to really prioritize like storytelling in particular, because design projects don't just manifest out of nowhere, right? There's an enticing moment, a story arc, a climax, main and supporting characters, a temporary conclusion. So if you can kind of captivate your audience with that story, I feel like you're halfway there. And that's kind of the approach I took. So from there, I'd recommend just structuring your work in a way that best supports that story. So for me, that meant using, branded colors to kind of guide the reader through the work, using engaging headings, scannable text, eye catching visuals, and immersive experiences like, prototype gifts, that kind of thing. So like
Yeah.
any design work, yeah, I think your projects should be delightful and purposeful, right? How you present them with that same intention.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. The stuff that you just said is actually what I've been telling my students as an educator, because a lot of them, they're like, wait, how do I learn storytelling? And we're not, journalists. And I'm like, well, you have read articles online, right? Like you have read newspapers back in the day. What caught your eyes usually? They usually have a kind of a hook. It's something that
Yeah.
has a unique twist that makes you wonder why. So if you kind of get
Mhm.
that, you can also structure how you write things, how you present things.
Mhm.
It's about you actually thinking about your users as a
Mhm.
portfolio reviewer,
Yeah.
right? Like why would they care amongst thousands of portfolios that they are looking at? If you
Mhm.
have something that is unconventional, unusual, they're going to
Right.
stop. If you
Right.
say, yeah, here's what I do, one, two, three, four, five, yeah, it's okay, So
Right.
yeah,
Not the
I
same.
think, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
You're hitting
definitely.
a lot of great points. And also I love how you said you were studying a lot of great portfolios before, which is
Yeah.
something that, unfortunately a lot of boot camps at the end it's kind of glossed over because it's so
Mhm.
kind of, short on time and students are kind of rushing to
Right.
the door. They're like, yeah,
Right.
I already have
And
projects. Let me just put them together and then I'm good to go. You're not good to go. So, yeah,
right.
right?
Yeah.
I love
And
that.
again, I think it's yeah, it's a trade-off, right? Like
Mhm.
when I say like there are no shortcuts, like
Yeah.
for me it took time. So like I started studying portfolios like 6 months before I even had any project to put in my portfolio.
Oh,
Yeah, so like before I even had my first designs ever, I was already studying like what happens at the final stage, like how does this look, the evolution of it. So it really took me that long to start building it. So by the time crunch time came, I already wasn't just totally lost. But that's a difficult model to, I guess, implement.
that's a great tip actually for anyone who's watching and listening who are still, early in their studies. Maybe you can do what Amy does. Don't think it's too early to start getting immersed in the
Hmm.
studying at the very least. Even though you don't have anything to present, it doesn't stop
Hmm.
you from studying and learning the presentation techniques. I think that's so
Hmm.
important. Yeah. So let's talk
Hmm.
about one of the projects that I read from your portfolio site, which is very interesting to me. You recently redesigned the Clubhouse app, which is very popular nowadays. So I just wonder, what inspired you to redesign Clubhouse, and what came out of that project?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was inspired to take that project on, honestly, from my own experience as a user of the product, right? And this fascination with this new social format that I saw emerging. So I was a beta user of Clubhouse. I joined pretty early on and I experienced firsthand how loved the app was and just how popular it was becoming by the day. But at the same time, I also recognized, as I was studying design, just some areas where the user experience could be optimized. And naturally, a new product, there's always going to be prioritizations and rooms for improvement. So yeah, it kind of seemed like the perfect opportunity to really push myself as a junior designer then and tackle some really complex UX challenges in social audio, which I was confident would become the next, big format on social platforms. So with that being said, the project came with a lot of challenges, but also a lot of rewards. I was able to connect with so many great people, from fellow designers at all levels to startup founders and even some big execs who were inspired and impressed by my work, which was really humbling for me. But it was also really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Wow.
was. Crazy. Yeah. But it was also a really important lesson for me just on the value of hard work, but also kind of owning your wins, right? Because to be honest, it was really, really difficult for me to embrace a lot of the praise that I got for that project. I suffered from tremendous
Mm.
imposter syndrome, almost like this weird sense of like
Mm.
shame or like, oh my God, now I have to like live up to this project. Or is this the only thing I can do? Was it a
Yeah.
one hit wonder? I don't know where it came from. I was just in this flow state. So that was really challenging for me, but it was important for me to learn that even if you can't recognize, your own achievements and hard work when you're in the trenches of a project, that's like kind
Yeah.
of consuming like that was, it doesn't mean that you're not producing meaningful work. So I think, there's value in being vulnerable and sharing your work with the world and kind of seeing how it's received for you to get a more objective perspective, right? To balance that self awareness. So that was the biggest learning moment for me, for sure.
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear. I actually didn't know that you were suffering from that, imposter syndrome when you worked on a project. And I definitely saw that it was very popular on Medium where you published it. And I think, as a fellow content creator, I definitely can relate to that because, oftentimes you will publish something and it relates to a lot of people and it gets a tremendous amount of views. And sometimes it's just like, okay, and people aren't, viewing as much and you're like, oh, maybe I'm not, that good. I only did one good thing and people are not
Right.
watching anymore. So it's actually really relatable to a lot of people and also in our own life it's actually really easy for us to
Mhm.
dismiss our own achievements because we often are told to be more humble, which is obviously we should do that.
Mhm.
But at the same time, small
Mhm.
wins are totally worthy of celebrating. And we often feel like we are not
Right.
worthy of that. So good lesson.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, so speaking of which, so you actually shared quite a bit about your own personal stories in your About page, which is awesome. I encourage my students to do that a lot in my school. So could you speak a little bit to about that, and also some of the concerns some designers have, if they share too much about their own personal lives outside of their professional lives, maybe that would impact their employment potentials. How can you speak to that?
yeah, no, that's a really interesting question. And yeah, a bit nuanced. Like, I don't know if there's, a definitive right or wrong way to approach it, but just kind of my take on it. I personally believe that your About page is the most precious part of your entire portfolio, right? At the end of the day, there's a human behind the pixels, or at least there should be, right? So I'm of the opinion that any human deserves a face, a name, a voice, and a story just as much as your work does. So, that's kind of my take on it. And beyond that, I just have a personal philosophy to kind of always arrive in any space as my fullest self. So, me being vulnerable, personal, like super honest right off the bat is kind of the easiest, most natural thing for me to do. So that's why I took that approach. But I'd suggest to anyone, for at the very least, to include a little information about your journey into design and what you love to do outside of design, I think is hugely important as well. I think you stand out a lot more as a holistic being with a story, passions, and a personality rather than, just kind of a one dimensional job title. I think we're a lot more than that. So I'd argue that any potential employer who isn't interested in your fullest self is probably not the most sustainable long term partner in your journey, anyways. So I think that you
Exactly.
should really share and celebrate,
Yeah.
but that's kind of my personal
It's
philosophy on it.
yeah, I so agree with that. I feel like everything that's coming out of your mouth, I always say to my students as well. So we probably have the same, similar opinion. Yeah, I mean, obviously there are people who are always gonna be critical of, us or who appreciates us. So we can't be the right person for everyone, for every place, but we are also finding our right fit. It's not that we're trying to find, an employer. We're also trying to find the right fit for us, for our professional life.
Mhm.
So it's a two-way street.
Mhm.
It's not just like you begging them for a job. They also have to work for, for you in your professional philosophy. So absolutely. So
Yeah.
yeah, I know that you're actually getting more and more active in the content creation space in design. And I think that's a really great thing. So, can you tell us what inspired you to start creating content and how do you usually generate ideas?
Hmm. Yeah, I think what really clicked for me was realizing that you could share content that was just an authentic extension of yourself. That was like a light bulb moment for me. So for me, that means speaking on my experience as, a first generation immigrant or a minority in tech, my experience as a rising junior designer who's gone through a boot camp, crafting a portfolio with attention and detail, my design philosophy, all that good stuff, right? But the more you share, the more people want to know more, and then the more opportunities you have to kind of share some more, right? So with each piece of content I put out, someone will maybe respond with some feedback or ask more questions, and then that will inspire me to kind of continue the cycle of sharing further. So the ideas are super organic and kind of just come from lived experiences or from the people who react to those lived experiences I share. So again, kind of like seamless, easy, not
Yeah.
easy, but kind of, if you put it out there, you're going to get some sort of feedback and reaction, and that'll
Yeah,
drive it
absolutely.
forward.
I have the same experience myself. I'm actually, a lot of students ask me, how can I network with people naturally without
Mhm,
sounding like I'm asking them for something or, just bothering people? And
mhm.
I actually suggest content creation as one of the best ways to do that, because if you're creating something, people naturally are going to talk about that with you, and you're not asking anything, and you strike
Yeah,
up a natural conversation. It's kind of like going to a coffee shop and then you both, like someone else
yeah,
saw something happen, you saw something happen, you talk about it. That's the most natural way
mhm,
of meeting people back in the day, right? So nowadays it's
right,
like,
yeah,
we create content and people do the same thing. And actually, some of my podcast guests
right,
also stemmed from content creation. Like I wrote an article, they saw it, they reached out to me, and I was like, are you interested in being a podcast guest? So a lot of those organic connections, and
right,
even I saw a lot of viral LinkedIn posts where somebody posted something and then they
mhm,
got a job from it because somebody else saw it. They're like, cool, this person, we want this person. So you never know, right? It's kind of
right. No, there's
yeah, it's
a
kind
lot
of
of
like,
value.
yeah, one way to establish your personal brand, and the other way is to extend your personal influence, and you never know what's going to come back. So I applaud you for being more and more
Mhm,
active in this space, and I look forward to seeing more content from you. And there's another really interesting thing on your portfolio that I like to talk a little bit about. It's you included a playground page where you showcase some of your more creative design projects that's not necessarily, maybe in your main design realm, but you still decide to
mhm.
show them, and they're really fun to look at. So, what inspired you to do that?
Yeah, so I'm very interested in visual design, right? And have been taking kind of ongoing courses to just improve my skill set there. And I love exploring just fun concept projects that allow me to improve on that craft while simultaneously expressing myself. It's, kind of two birds, one stone sort of thing. So after a while, I realized that instead of keeping all of this work hidden in a Figma file, I should just start sharing it. So again, the same idea of like just putting work out there and see what sticks. Not only just to showcase the skills I'm building and kind of catalog the evolution of that, but also to just show that I'm constantly working on something new. So just because I'm quiet or, you haven't seen a case study come up in a bit doesn't mean that I'm staying still. Like there's more work on the way and I'm just constantly, trying to improve.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's also kind of like a creative juice, I don't know, creative playground for yourself that you keep
Yeah.
inspiring yourself. And I would argue that it's one form of content creation too. If someone sees, something that they like, they might comment on it. We
Mhm.
actually had another podcast guest not long ago, and he had the same page as you. He also has a playground page, and I
Mhm.
remember he had something really interesting. It's sort of like I don't know, it's a Swiss poster generator. He's also a developer, so he has like a lot of creative coding projects going on. So I thought that's really fun because
Nice.
he can share that to someone who can just use the tool, the generator, to play around, and they might start following
Yeah.
him, right? So I think
So cool.
yeah, I highly encourage creatives to not get shy about your more personal uh, artwork and creative projects and
Mhm.
still show it in a separate category so people can see who you are creatively.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
another thing that I really think that you stood out is on your resume. So I really dig deep into your background. So on your resume, you
Yeah,
said
no,
that
I appreciate it.
yeah. On your resume, you said that you took some additional courses in that design EQ training, which is very interesting to me. And also, you took a course in design system. So, those two really caught my eyes. Can you tell us a little bit about what they are, why you decided to take them, and how did they go?
Yeah. So the EQ training for designers is through Design to Be, and it's taught by Rachel Weissman, who's a former Google designer and a current mindfulness training coach. So that is an 8-week program where we learn and unpack everything about emotional intelligence and how it relates to design work. So self awareness, resilience, authenticity, all that good stuff. So deeply rooted in kind of behavioral psychology, but also, very applicable and tangible to like just what, how to craft, leverage that into your design craft. So, I mean, I was inspired to take that course because, although I knew about emotional intelligence and, was aware that that was like a strength of mine, I didn't know a lot of the science or nuances around it or how I could leverage it more strategically in my work, which is extremely important to me. So I wanted that foundational understanding and thought it would be hugely valuable in the long term. And similar with, yeah, the design systems boot camp. So that was taken with Memorizely, which is, another online design school taught by the brilliant Xander Whitehurst, who's the CEO of the company. And I've actually been a member of the Memorize community, their online Slack community, for quite some time. And I just always loved the energy and support coming out of there. So when I saw that Xander had launched a boot camp just on design systems, I was immediately intrigued by that because, I'm fascinated by design systems and just, utilizing a systems thinking approach in my design work. So learning how to build one from scratch sounded like it would be very valuable and beneficial to me. So I'm really a self learner and kind of just always hungry to learn more. So I'm constantly on the hunt for, an engaging course or program to sink my teeth into. But these two really stood out to me as the perfect complements to what I was already exploring on my own. So they've been
Yeah.
great. I would recommend them to anyone.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, and I love that you share that on your resume as well because it definitely stood out. It even stood out more than a bachelor's, a master's. You know what I mean? Like everybody has that these days, but it shows that you're very intellectually curious and you love, self improvement and continuous learning, which is very important. So finally, to wrap up, I was wondering what's coming up for you. Do you have any fun side projects or going on? So what's coming up? Would you like to share with us?
Yeah. So, yeah, this week is quite special because I'm actually speaking at my first conference on Thursday. I'll be giving a talk
Yeah,
at
I saw
Treehouses.
that. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so excited. Yeah, it's Treehouse's virtual conference. I'll be speaking on underrepresentation in tech, which is, yeah, a topic that's, I'm very passionate about just, kind of speaking on it. So, very much looking forward to that. Other than that, I'm, working on some fun passion projects with friends, developing apps and designing a cool children's book series. So, just keep, stimulating the
Ooh,
creativity there. And my hopes and ambitions for the future are honestly just to keep learning as much as I can. So, like I mentioned, I'm a perpetual learner anyways. So that should be easy, but I really hope to keep making ground in the design field and just get more well versed in product development, strategy, accessibility, and one day be able to lead a world class design team myself. But even more importantly to me, though, is honestly, I mean, it sounds cliche, but it's really helping other people and empowering those around me. So I'm currently a mentor and I would love to develop that a bit more. My maker of success is really to just be able to help other people find their success. So whether that's, making organic connections, mentoring, joining for conversations like these, that's the mark I really hope to make in the industry.
that's awesome. That's really amazing to hear. It seems like there's so many amazing opportunities coming up for you, and we would love to stay in touch and see what's happening.
Oh,
Thank you
definitely.
so much. Thank you so much for joining us today. And to hear more inspiring stories like Amy's, definitely stay tuned to us on all social media platforms at Path and Bound. We will be back for more episodes like this. Stay tuned.